going to start recording, and then Jesse, if you want to introduce yourself and take it away. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. So my name's Jessie. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm from the Center for Student Wellness. I am so thankful and excited to be here talking about stress care, especially at this time of year or this time of the semester. Um, and I always feel so glad that this is something that we offer at this time of year because I think at about this time of the semester, I start getting like lots of workshop requests for stress care. And I'm like, yep, makes sense. We're all there. We all are feeling that pressure and that stress. So we're going to be talking a little bit about exactly what it sounds like, stress, and some things that we can do to combat that stress and help us overcome it. And not just overcome it, but like, yeah, anyway, we'll get into it. So yeah, I'm from the Center for Student Wellness. And while this says our ACEs peer health educators, normally this is something that they would be presenting. I'm a health educator and our ACEs are our students, but they are all very busy, as you can probably imagine. And so I'm really excited to be doing this. So we like to start out with this land use acknowledgement. So if you were to read over it quickly, you would see like we just like to acknowledge that forced displacement and violence is ongoing, as is colonialism, and it marginalizes many groups of indigenous people that originally were here in this area. And so we like to honor and respect the diversity that Utah has, and through education and engagement. And specifically, we want to commit to learning about their history and contemporary experiences. Yeah, so if you have any questions about that, you can go ahead and ask. But our mission in the Center for Student Wellness is to cultivate a holistically well and safe campus community. We believe that wellness and safety is foundational for success, and that equitable access to inclusive wellness services, education, and support will create more resilient, thriving, and a resilient and thriving University of Utah. So what we do in the Center for Student Wellness is exactly what it says. We have, and we'll talk about our resources a little bit more towards the end, but we have everything from victim survivor advocates to what we're doing right now, which is education. We love to work with students and just help as many students as possible have the best education and the educational experience as possible. Yeah. So this is just a small little group of our students. So this is our mental health team, and they're wonderful. So if you ever see them around campus, say hi. They'd love to talk to you about mental health things. Okay, so let's see. Let me move. I love all of your faces, but I'm just gonna move like some of these things down. Yeah. There we go. Okay, now I can see a little better. So we're going to start out with just the objectives of this workshop. So first of all, we want to identify personal indicators of being stressed. So what does stress look like for you? And it's a fingerprint. It's different for everyone. Second, we want to acknowledge how stressors may differ for others. So like I just said, it's a fingerprint. It's different for everyone, and it presents differently for all people. Third, we want to talk about developing self-care techniques. So what are some things that we can do to better, combat our stress? And then fourth is articulate the difference between empathy and sympathy. And we'll talk a little bit later why that's important. Let's see, there you go. So a couple of group agreements first. So for all of our workshops, we work off of these group agreements. First is the Vegas rule. It's exactly what it sounds like. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? So what's shared here stays here. So we try to respect the confidentiality of everyone in this space. If there's something that they share that is personal to them, we would like to let them keep that, right? We don't want to go around being like, oh my gosh, did you hear what so-and-so said, right? So we keep it right here, safe and sound. We also assume best intentions, which means that we allow for the possibility that everyone means well. So if something is said that doesn't sit well with you, you can reach out to me afterwards. You could even email me and just let me know. It could be something that we address, but we definitely like to believe that everyone means, best intentions. We want to share the air. So that that goes for me too. I'm quite the talker. But we want to allow everyone to speak up and allow others to contribute as well. So I want to hear what you say, and we all want to hear what everyone says. So we'll share the air. We'll share our own stories. So allow others to own and share their stories. And what we mean by that is if you're wanting to share something, make sure that it is something that has either happened to you or it is your experience, not something like, well, my sister or my brother or a student, share your own stories. And then self-care, which is actually something we'll be talking about. Take care of yourself if there's a topic that comes up or something that you need a break from, or if you need to just go to the bathroom and get a drink or something like that, take care of yourself. You don't need permission. Just go ahead and go out and do that. Okay, so before we start, we like to start with a short grounding activity. And essentially what that is it's like a very, very short meditation. You can find these for free on the Counseling Center's website. We'll have those websites at the end when we talk about resources. Yeah, so I'm just going to do like a really short grounding activity with you all. So if you want to turn off your camera for this, you're totally welcome to. Let's see. Not everyone wants to be stared at while they're meditating. So go ahead and do that. And we're just going to take a couple of minutes. If you're in a seated position, go ahead and just firmly plant your feet on the ground. And then sit up nice and tall. And roll your shoulders back so that your chest is open. And wherever you are, whether it's leaning up against a wall or just sitting back in your chair, just sit back so that you're relaxed, but that also you're sitting up nice and tall with your feet grounded or planted on the floor. And I want you to take a second to take 3 deep breaths. So if you also want to make sure that your mic is off, which I think everyone's is. You're going to breathe in through the nose. And something I like to do is count to 4. So you breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold it, 2, 3, 4, and then out through the mouth, 2, 3, 4. So go ahead and take just a couple more seconds to take some deep breaths. And once you've done that, go ahead and return your breathing just back to your normal breathing. And I want you to take a second to notice and just do a quick body scan. So starting in your toes, something I like to do is wiggle the part of, our bodies that we're thinking of. So starting in your toes, give them a little wiggle and then relax them. And then move into your heels, then up to your ankles and your calves and so on, and just do a quick body scan. And if there's a part of your body that you come across that is, feeling uncomfortable or feeling tight or tense, take a second to just relax that. So as you're doing this, I want you to think about you just melting into the floor or into your seat or wherever you're at. Almost like there's warm water just being poured over you. That any tension or any tightness that you're carrying, that warm water that's going over you is just taking it with you, running off and going into the ground. So I'm going to give about 30 seconds to just let there be silence and allow your mind to do whatever it wants to do. So if it wanders, or if you just want to focus on one certain thing. Good. So some of you might have closed your eyes as we, started doing this grounding activity. So I want you to take 2 more deep breaths. And then on that second breath, as you exhale, go ahead and open your eyes and bring it back to this class. Hey, so hopefully everyone is feeling exactly what it sounds like, a little bit more grounded, right? And what we mean by grounded is that you feel a little bit more centered, a little more focused, even a little more calm. We hope that you had the chance to just take a second for yourselves. And what's interesting about stress care is that part of your self-care routine could be as simple as what we just did, whether it's self-guided or it's an app or some type of guided meditation. Meditation is a great way to bring calmness back to your mind. And especially, I like to talk to students about, we say meditation, but really meditation is anything that brings like that silence and that calmness to the mind. So even if you're right in the center of a really difficult exam, um, and you come across a question or so, and you just like, oh my gosh, I have no idea. We've all been there, and your heart starts racing, and maybe you start to sweat, and you're just, oh my gosh, is it hot in here? Is it just me? One thing that you can do in that moment is to stop. You could even close your eyes if you want to, but just take 3 deep breaths. So our breathing is part of what can help us control our heart rate, helps us stay under control and calm. So if you have any questions, just let me know, or I'll give some suggestions at the end, or just right now. I really like the app Headspace, but that's my own personal preference. There are so many out there, so many ways of meditating. And if you don't meditate already, I would suggest it. It's really great. It's not, it doesn't have to be spiritual. It doesn't have to be, anything like that. So, consider things that could work for you, especially when you're in the moment of when you're in like a stressful moment. Think about something that can help, realistically help you stay calm, right? Okay, so what is stress? And I want to put this out to you all. So if you want to either put it in the chat, or if you want to just take your camera off or your mic off, mute, and just answer the question. So that is the question. What is stress?
I can say something.
Absolutely.
For me, seems really heavy. So it's like a lot of pressure, a lot of responsibilities, or things that come fast that you have to deal with cause stress. And so It's where like you're having a visceral reaction to something, you know.
Absolutely. That is brilliant. Is it Angela? Angela, thank you so much. I loved the word that you used, heaviness, right? Stress is that really, really heavy weight that we carry around thinking that, you know, it has to be perfect, or maybe it needs to be at this time, or there's a due date. It has like a certain crunch to it that kind of tends to weigh down on us. Great. That's wonderful. Thank you. Let's see in the chat. Oh, I love it. Look, another person said that it's heavy. It is heavy, right? Stress can be triggers that cause us to pay attention to what's going on around us. That is really good too. I love that. Stress is something that can bring to our attention what needs to be brought to our attention, right? Maybe it's something that needs to be focused on a little more. I like that. Very nice. Oh, there's one. Maybe I missed it. Discomfort or tension. Lovely. Hey, so I'm definitely getting like, we probably all are thinking of probably the same thing. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, you know, we probably all feel like there's a heaviness to it. It's something that we all go through in life, right? It's not something that only one of us will ever experience. So you're absolutely right. Stress is something that can be difficult, to say the least, right? We'll just say that because it can be difficult. So simply put, stress is a reaction to a stimulus that disturbs our physical or mental equilibrium. And I like the word equilibrium because it's that balance that we want, right? That we all want in our lives. But that's not always possible. Sometimes there's things that come into our lives that throw us off that balance, and that is stress, right? It can often be a stressful situation. So it's something that can trigger the fight or flight response. So what we mean by that, fight or flight, is that feeling of like, I either need to escape this or I'm going to stay and I'm going to figure this out. And that's our fight or our flight. So what it means by causing hormones such as adrenaline or cortisol to surge is when we have that fight or flight response, that response of just needing to survive it, right? Needing to overcome this really stressful situation. Those hormones can be released, and over an extended period of time of always having those hormones released can be harmful in some ways. So really, really great responses. You are all right on top of it. Okay, so what are some individual factors of stress, right? So we have academics, which is kind of why we're all here, right? Life experiences, and even identities. So I like to think about that last one a little bit. It's not something that is often talked about, but things like just being a person of color, or being a woman, or being, you know, any type of identifying attribute can be stressful in certain situations, right? So we all have so many different factors about us, about our lives, about the things that we do or the way that we think that can cause some stress. So what are some stresses that you would say you or maybe your peers experience academically? Like, what are some student stressors? And again, you can put those in the chat as well, or just say them out loud. GPA, yes. Jobs. Running late to class, yes, that's the story of my life. Deadlines, okay, exams. I use the exams example for a reason because I've been there probably a billion times. Like every time I take an exam, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know this one. And whoo, start to sweat. It's really hot. Midterms and finals, yes, we are coming right up on that, right? Those are great. And those are some things that we all, I don't know if struggle with is the right word, but those are things that we all find as stressful factors in our lives, right? Okay. Wonderful. You guys are awesome. So to talk about this little slide here for a second, we want to acknowledge that not all stress is bad stress. So in this little, actually, you know what? This is a good starter one, but my favorite one is actually this one. I know, just looking at it is like probably a little bit more stressful because like the last one was so nice and clean. And this one looks a little bit, more. So, but looking at it, it's the same concept, but it breaks it down a little bit better. So over here in the green, we have, inactive, laid back, so too little stress. This part in the green is where we're not really learning a lot. We're not being challenged very much. There's not really much growth there. But then in the yellow, this is where we love to see people be. In this yellow space where you're growing, you're learning, things aren't too hectic, but you're still, progressing and doing well. In the orange is where we normally start hearing students describe themselves as exhausted. Like I feel exhausted, or I feel overwhelmed, or I feel tired. That's when we know that it's too much because it's starting to have like that physical, it's starting to have an effect on their like physical wellness, right? They're feeling tired, they're feeling anxious, they're feeling different things like that. So once we get into anxiety, we kind of tip into the red section down here, which is like panic or anger or anxiety. So when we're feeling too much stress and it's, really starting to weigh on us, it starts to really show physically. So, yeah, take a look at this. And something else that I always like to point out at this point is that it's a spectrum. Something that someone brought up to me once that I just loved is sometimes it depends on what you're talking about, right? When it's school, maybe I'm in the red, but maybe with family, I'm in the green. And then maybe it's switched. Maybe I'm only taking one class, so I'm in like the green or yellow, but I have things in my family life that are really, really stressful and it's in the red. So there are many aspects of our lives that could be in many different places upon this spectrum. So when one person's life is starting to, when they have many aspects that are in the red, is where we really, grow concern and we want to really take care of our students the most at those points. And at any point that they're in the red, but really when, hopefully that makes sense, multiple aspects of our lives can be in multiple different places. Okay, so here's another question for you all. I kind of went into it a little bit already, but when you are feeling stressed, so this is the wellness wheel. The wellness wheel is exactly what it looks like. So these are all the parts and pieces that we in the Center for Student Wellness believe make up a person's wellness. So when we talk about balance, we talk about, doing well in each of these aspects of your life. And there may be many more, but these are the ones that we focus on mostly. So when you're stressed, what changes or what types of effects do you have on these different parts of your wellness? So just for an example, I know we talked about physical already just a little bit, but let's say you're in a test, you start to feel stressed and you start to either your heart rate is climbing or you start to sweat. Those are physical attributes of stress, right? So what are some others?
I think sometimes those like segments can grow and get really big where you spend a lot of time in like that emotional area and maybe the physical is like non-existent, like you're not working out. Or I know sometimes with like the social, like I won't go see my friends for a couple of weeks and be like, oh, like that's not like I don't feel whole or well, and it's because I'm missing at some of those parts.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that is a brilliant point of view because it's true, right? When we are, let's say when we're really, really stressed about our finances, which is really common for a lot of students, right? when we're really focused there, so we're working a lot of hours, or maybe it's just weighing on us so much that we stop talking to family, or we stop hanging out with friends, or maybe however you acknowledge or work on your spiritual wellness, maybe you stop doing those things. Maybe you stop doing so well in school, or you just stop studying altogether. So your intellectual wellness, it's so, you see how like everything, when it becomes overwhelming or too much, and we get into that like orange or red space, any one of these pieces of our wellness can get almost too much focus so that the others fall behind. Kind of interesting, right? So how do you know you're stressed? So we want to go into specifically physical, social, emotional, and academically. How would you know that you're stressed? And we talked a little bit already about physical, and it's different for everyone. You know, we talked a little bit already about like, well, maybe this is emotional, but like anger, you feel angry, so maybe you lash out. Or you, I always say like heart rate and when you start to sweat, because that's me. I use myself as as like an example, but like I do, it kind of gets like, you know, nerve wracking or scary or things like that. Or like social wellness we talked about is not, and this is one that we really, really want to focus on, is if you notice a friend or a family member who has been acting different lately, or has just kind of, you know, fallen off the face of the earth, is what some people say. Those are the ones we want to reach out to, right? Because most likely they're going through some things. They're not mad at you, or they're not anything like that. They just need a friend, someone to talk to, or someone to help them out. And that may be you. So at that time, it's totally wonderful to reach out for that help, which we'll kind of talk about resources more at the end. And then academically, how do you know when we're stressed? A lot of times we see students, either their grades, and not even that their grades are like getting worse, but it's even more that they're just like so focused, or maybe like overly focused on grades, on classes, or maybe they get a bad grade and it just, you know, it just crushes them, and they just feel so emotionally about their grades and things like that. So we want to watch out for students that are always, or that are, you know, feeling those ways or exhibiting those types of behaviors, and make sure that they are safe. Okay, and so talking about stress management tips. So first, and I always like to start out with this little disclaimer. It's so much easier said than done. And I completely recognize that, because it's all nice to talk about it here, but putting it into practice is so much harder. Otherwise, we'd all be doing it, right? And we'd all just be so great at it. But talking a little bit about tips is knowing what's on your plate. So whether that's keeping a planner, or it's, you know, like studying for a test. And that's why I say much easier said than done, because I have not always studied for all my tests all the time. But knowing what you're up against, right? Get to know your projects, get to know what needs to be done and how long it's going to take you to do it. So if you begin to understand and recognize like, okay, this is how big this project is, or this is how big this assignment is, this is how much time I think I'm going to need to do it, and go ahead and do what works for you. Setting priorities. So, you know, it's just so funny because I keep thinking like so much easier said than done, because I've been there before where I would rather play Pokemon on my Switch than study for a test. But setting those priorities, right? It's so hard. It is, to put things that are maybe more important over things that are not important, and not take that back. Not that it's not important, because it's actually a big part of your self-care to do things that you enjoy. So set those as priorities as well. Find a way to find that balance, right? And then eat, sleep, and be active. Again, so much easier said than done, right? I know, but it makes such a big difference in our lives when we are eating well, sleeping well, and being active. And by eating well, I don't mean like you just eat salads all the time and fruits and vegetables and that's all you ever eat. I mean like making sure that you actually eat at all. So often students go without eating for hours and hours and hours, like breakfast, lunch, and then they get home and it's just like they are starving, right? And I speak for myself too, because I've been there. We get so busy that we just don't even really think to take care of ourselves, right? So whether it's snacks, whether it's whatever kind of snacks, we try to have snacks always in the Center for Student Wellness. So if you ever need something to eat, like those little applesauce packets that you just grab and go, just eat something, right? And make sure, and if it's healthy, then that's even more wonderful, but just eat something at least. And then get good sleep and be active. And that could be going for a walk. It doesn't have to be like running a marathon every morning. Okay, and then what can we do when we are stressed? And especially when we see our peers, maybe if we notice that a friend of ours is stressed or things like that. So the first off is to just prevent the best that we can. And like I've been saying, like I recognize that it's not always preventable. Some things happen in our lives that just are the worst, right? And we can't stop it. We can't control it. It just happens. But do the best you can to prevent those situations where you know that you're going to be very, very stressed. So for example, like studying for a test or like using your blinker or like things like that. Like there's things that we can do to prevent stressful situations sometimes. And then, like I was saying, self-care. I love talking about self-care because self-care oftentimes is thought of as like just bubble baths and, a little champagne at night or something. Like self-care is so much more than just those things that we hear about or talk about a lot. Self-care includes, like I was saying, like for me, part of my self-care is doing things that I enjoy, even if that's just playing the Nintendo Switch for a minute or an hour. Or, oh, I heard a good one today. I can't remember. They said self-care for them, it's not always like the easy things. Like self-care includes getting help and talking to people. That's what it was. So when you're going through a hard time, like actually reaching out to family members or friends or getting the help that you need in whatever way it is. And that can be hard. That's hard to be that vulnerable. So self-care is whatever you need to take care of yourself and whatever that looks like for you. Some people knit 30 minutes a day. That's great. Do whatever you need to do to stay focused and to stay well and healthy. And then, of course, there's resources and support. So maybe part of that self-care is resources and support and finding that help that you need to be the best that you can be. And we are going to talk about that in a minute. But first, I want to show this really, really awesome video. So we're going to talk a little bit about sympathy and empathy. And these are really, really important points that are going to come up in this video. And hopefully it plays. It might not. Let me see. Hang on. I'm going to have to find this on YouTube. This thing is just so funny sometimes. But it's the cutest little thing. Okay, give me just 1 minute. This right. Share sound, optimize for video clip. You would think that like throughout the whole pandemic that I've like learned to master Zoom, but like here we are. Okay, So like I said, there's going to be this fun little ad. So it's just going to play through. But once it gets through that, I want you to notice in this.
So what is empathy and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying
Sorry.
out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Okay. Oh, stop. Okay. I can do this. Do. Okay, so just take a second to gather your thoughts. Which I am using as an excuse to get back to here. Okay, awesome. There we go. So you can share out loud or you can share in the comments. But what were your thoughts on that video? What are some, maybe a quote or maybe some things that stood out to you? Said that is me. Am I reading that at the wrong time? Maybe.
I think for me, I'll get started since get a little quiet. I do think one thing that's helpful to think about is the not comparisons of where I gave examples of like another similar example that wasn't in the video but just remind me of was if like someone say like, oh, my mom died, and another person be like, well, my dog died, so it's not, relevant, and you're not in the moment with them. And so I did really like at the end where it talked about like, I really don't know what that feels like or what can I do to be here with you versus like trying to say like, well, it could have been this or it could be better, or I had this other experience that's not related. So I did really like kind of thinking about it in that way, and it took me a while growing up to get to that point.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think for me, I never really thought much, before getting into health education, that there was a real big difference between empathy or sympathy. Um, but now looking back at it, it's like, even now, I struggle to just try and stop myself from saying something that starts with at least, right? And I think about even in my own personal experience, when I'm mad at something, I just need to be mad for that moment. And it drives me crazy when I'm just gonna use my spouse. So my spouse, whenever, he is like, well, you probably could have done X, Y, or Z better, or like, well, or he tries to like take the perspective of like what I could have done better or what I could do better next time. And it's just like, I just need to be mad right now. Like if I can just be super irritated right now, and then once that is all let out, however I need to let it out, then my mind is so much more capable of being like, okay, let's look back at it and see what I could have done better or what could have gone differently. Um, and I think Brene used really, really awesome examples. There are times in our lives where we may not know what to say. I do suicide trainings or suicide awareness trainings on campus, and I get it all the time because it's difficult and it's hard. It's hard for me. It's hard to, um, oh, I don't know what that was, but it's hard to think of how we might hold that conversation, right? If somebody comes to us and says, I just had a miscarriage, or I think I've been contemplating suicide, or however they're going to say that. Well, in those moments, it's like immediate stress, right? Like, I don't know what to say. And we feel so inclined to make them feel better and just come up with something positive really fast, right? And that's where those at least statements come from, where it's like, well, at least, or like, at least we can find you some help. Let's get you some. And so it's like, a much better response is just like just being honest. Like I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm so glad that you shared that with me. And I really want to help you, and I want to do this together so that I can learn too, so that we can learn together what resources there are and how we can do this together. So I loved that video. So how that applies to what we're learning is when stressful situations happen, whether it's academically or personally in our lives, um, whether it's for us or especially for those that we love or for friends and family that we come in contact with, even just here on campus, and when these things come up, a wonderful response is to work on it with them. So yeah, thanks for all of your feedback. So to wrap up, creating a plan for the next time you feel overwhelmed by stress. Let's think about that for a second. So it's not something we're going to go over right now, but think about a lot of what we talked about. And when you have time, maybe think about a plan, right? So how can you prevent stress from happening? What are some priorities that you can set? And then what are your resources if you do feel very overwhelmed by stress? So let's quickly visit those resources. So there's the University Counseling Center. They're wonderful. And like I said earlier, they have those grounding activities. They have recordings that you can just go on and listen to. Like they have all different kinds. It's like grounding activities for helping you fall asleep or helping you stay calm for a test or just all sorts of different things. They're awesome. We have a mindfulness center. Did you guys know we had a mindfulness center? We do. And there's the website and it's wonderful. The Women's Resource Center is awesome. And then as well, the Center for Student Wellness is my personal favorite. And then Outdoor Adventures. I love that it's on this list. Because if you think about stress, right? What is something that you can do to combat stress? get outdoors, go do things that you love that doesn't have anything to do with like working and working and working and working. Okay, so I want to turn a few minutes or even just a couple minutes over to you all. If anyone has any questions, here's our contact information that you can take down. Yeah, and reach out. My personal email is j.burns@sa.utah.edu. But if you email the wellness account, so wellness.utah.edu, they can forward that to me as well. But does anyone have any questions or final thoughts?
Yes, we have an in-person
I don't
question.
know if you can hear me,
Okay.
but I think what's hard is looking at that Brene Brown thing and the crawling down the hole, because sometimes the person wants to be down there and pulls you down. So I guess that would be the one concern I have in that video, like yes, you can be empathetic, but what happens if the person just wants to hold you down there? And I think that's important to address on if you're trying to type like I feel like almost in some ways you need to also have protection from that. Like if I have some people in my life that I like to live open and vulnerably, but sometimes people take advantage of that. So I think there has to be care before you crawl down with somebody. That's what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm super excited that you brought that up. Because that is a really, really important point that you made, is boundaries, right? Being able to set up where we can help and how much we can help, right? If we're carrying so much already ourselves, a good practice that even I'm trying, that not even I, but like that I'm also trying to get into, is before I vent to somebody, is asking them like, hey, do you have the space? Like, I wanted to talk to you about, something. Like, I'm trying to think of an example. Like, I'm feeling really stressed about school right now. Do you feel like if I were to vent to you, that's something that you would be able to listen to right now? Engaging, where a person is at, because sometimes when we vent or when we talk to people, we just like freely and openly just put a lot on other people, and we don't know what they're already going through. And especially where sometimes there's an expectation, right? Especially when you're a family member or a friend, that you're just going to fully commit, whatever that looks like, to helping somebody, when really maybe that isn't possible for you right now. Maybe you have your own things to do. And so what that help could look like is like, maybe you're going through something similar, but I know this counseling center at the U, right? That would love to talk to you about this. Let me send you the website, or just something like that, and putting it, like, redirecting them to a place that can help them. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. Because I love what you said. We shouldn't have to feel like completely responsible for another person's well-being. We can help, right? But there's some people who are paid to help another person's well-being, and those are the people that can probably help them the most. So those are the places that we want to send people. Does that make sense? Because we're not psychologists, we're not counselors, we're not doctors. I don't know, maybe some of you are, I'm not sure. But and so to take that upon ourselves would be not only too much, but we might also be doing that person a disservice by, like you said, like going down into that dark hole and staying there with them. Like, maybe it's nice to go down there and help, and be a good listening ear if you have the capacity, but setting up those boundaries and you can just state it, like, I'm not a counselor. I don't know much about this topic. Let me point you towards someone who does. Does that make sense?
She's nodding her head.
Yeah, I'm nodding.
Okay, good.
No problem. And then in the chat too, we had some really good comments. One person said, this was a little bit earlier, but it's really to go into fix it mode when someone is sharing struggle, and then that situation where problems can arise, and that validation and listening can be more important than a solution. And then another point about like, it's not your fault if people don't respond well to your boundaries. I mean, I think like,
I appreciate those reminders.
Absolutely. I think that is, it's so important. But like I said earlier, and maybe I just sound like, I'm just repeating myself, but there are people out there who are paid to be that kind of help, right? And so even in QPR, which are like the trainings that I do, the suicide awareness trainings that I do, that isn't something that we suggest people carry on their own. Like we suggest that you question, like you can ask the question like, hey, is this something that you're struggling with? And then let them talk and then find them a resource. That's the training in like really, really condensed. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like you can be a friend, but you maybe in some cases you really even shouldn't be like their psychiatrist or their counselor or their anything. Find someone who can do that for you. That makes sense. And it's nice because it takes that responsibility off of your shoulders. Like you don't have to be responsible for that. And if they're not ready to reach out and find the help, then you can state clearly like what you can help with. It's like maybe just say like, hey, I can text you and just see how you're doing. Is that okay with you? Like once a week or something. And, just make sure that they're finding the help that they need, hopefully. Ooh, now I'm just rambling because I love this topic so much, is getting people the help that they actually need. So, okay, well, thank you so much for letting me be here and for letting me just chat all day. Again, this is our contact info. So please let me know if you have any questions or if there's anything that I can ever do to help.
thank you.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank